I was looking for the specific part where this president of the LDS Church proclaims Pope Francis to be their Peter. I remember I was watching a video maybe 2 years ago where a woman was a member of the LDS Church, and she was upset. I didn't really get why that would be upsetting, that he called him that. The most I took away from it was that the churches were aligning under one head, one figure. As I was going back trying to find where they specifically say that this president calls him the Peter now, and I haven't found it yet, but I found something as I was reading this that just hasn't left me. It just didn't set well right. And they talk about the keys and how the keys were lost and how they expect the keys to be returned. The keys that were given to Peter. So let's see if we can find it. So bear with me through a lot of this other stuff, but I mean, I guess it's important to lead up to how they're looking at it, how this author looks at it.
During the weekend of March 10, 2019, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints flew all 15 of its general authorities to Rome. Italy, a nation where up to 85% of its residents are Roman Catholics, as the newest temple built by the 16 million member church was officially dedicated. Among other events that weekend, President Russell M. Nelson was given a personal audience with Roman Catholic Pope Francis. There were many other photo ops, as this was the first time in history that all 15 general authorities had been together in one place outside the United States.
See, I think here is where they start to get into what was upsetting to them as members, but it's I think this is where they start to explain.
One snapshot taken at the LDS Rome Temple caught my attention. Nelson stood next to the statue portraying the Apostle Peter, first in line to the marble statues of Jesus's other apostles. His hand slightly reached out to touch the keys held in Peter's right hand. No doubt Matthew chapter 16 verse 19 is being referenced. It says, "I will give you, Peter, the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." The comparison was clear. Peter, whom the Roman Catholic Church claims to be its first pope, is the head of the former-day Saints. Nelson, meanwhile, is the leader of the Latter-day Saints. Seeing the photo for the first time, my jaw hit the ground. Understanding a little bit about LDS doctrine and teaching is important to comprehend what was intentionally meant. Concerning a doctrine known the Great Apostasy, Mormon Apostle Boyd Packer told a 2003 General Conference audience, "The church you belong to, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is the restored church. When you know what restored means, you will understand why standards of conduct are as they are. Following the crucifixion of Christ, an apostasy occurred. Leaders began to teach for doctrines the commandments of men. They lost the keys of authority and closed themselves off from the channels of revelation. That lost authority could not just be repossessed. It had to be restored by those who held the keys of authority anciently. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is not a remodeled version of another church. It is not an adjustment or a correction or a protest against any other church. They have their form of godliness and their goodness and value. The standard of truth has been erected. Ensign, Conference Edition, November 2003, page 24. A church manual says this.
And that right there, that's what stood out as this goes on. How they lost the keys, how they um, how they were started off on a certain level and it became corrupted. Um, the leaders began to teach for doctrines, um, doctrines, the commandments of men. Now I was like, man, doesn't that just sound so familiar, right? Just, I mean, it reminds me of like the stuff they do for when they're trying to tell the stories of Arthur, right? And how King Arthur, that is, and how the ways of the Wiccans and the Druids has been not the Wiccans, but specifically the Druids. That way, the time had to come to an end because it was the time of man, right? The commandments of man, the time of man, no longer respecting, you know, the old ways. It reminds me of Conan the Barbarian and the whole idea that there's a child that was born that he's being set aside and taught by druids until the time is of him to be brought to light and used. And how that reminds me of the whole Antichrist thing, right? How the idea that there's a man being groomed by all these world leaders and people of dark magic and stuff like that. So when the time comes, when the world's so out of control, he'll be brought to the forefront and he'll have all the answers on how to fix everything, and everyone will give over all their controls, their sovereignty, all their stuff to him because he'll have all the answers because he's been backed by the same secret societies that destroyed everything. And this is their guy, right? Because it just felt weird that this person was upset as much as they are without coming out flat out saying why they're upset, but that what would you call it there, the Pope, not the Pope, but the president would proclaim that he has the keys to heaven, while knowing that the men had lost the keys to heaven because they were teaching doctrines that weren't what they said the first founders of their faith put together. And he repeats that verse from Matthew a lot in this article. The whole, whatever you bind in heaven will be, whatever you bound on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loosen on earth will be loosed in heaven. That whole as above, so below, without saying that. That's what that verse really is, right? And how, look there, they lost the keys of authority and closed themselves off from channels of revelation. Channels, isn't that like, then aren't you saying that without them doing the specific rituals, and with those rituals, doing it with the purpose that it was given to them and intended, then by switching the purpose to glorify them and not their gods or God, right, in which it was constructed for them to do so, then them doing their rituals are useless, right? And I almost got the feeling that what this person is saying is that they need to bring back something that was dead. That's what I felt like they were saying. They need to bring back something that's dead, that was dead, that had the authority to give them their abilities, to give them their revelations, as it says, And it started making me think about all this stuff about the woolly mammoth and how they have the technology to reconstruct the woolly mammoth, how they have the DNA now, and how was it North Korea? It was either North Korea, one of the Koreas. They're the world's leading experts in cloning and things of that nature. And and you see them. They talk about, well, we have the DNA of this pharaoh, and which I mean, that's another one, right? And how they believe they found what's his name there, Nimrod's body. Is this the keys of authority that they're really talking about that have to be restored for them to have the full access that they want? So we'll go on.
One by one, the apostles were killed or otherwise taken from the earth. Because of wickedness and apostasy, the apostolic authority and priesthood keys were also taken from the earth. The organization that Jesus Christ had established no longer existed, and confusion resulted. More and more error crept into church doctrine, and soon the dissolution of the church was complete. The period of time when the true church no longer existed on earth is called the Great Apostasy. Soon pagan beliefs dominated the thinking of those called Christians. Gospel Principles, 2009, page 92.
I think that's interesting because you think about it, who founded the LDS Church, right? The Church of Latter-day Saints. Basically, you're going to boil it down to Joseph Smith, even though they give Brigham Young all the credit, right? Because after all the failed attempts to found it in... Oh, hold on. After all their failed attempts to found it, like in not Canada, what's that place there? Oh, in not Colorado. Shoot, it starts with a C. I can't think of it. California, right? They went to California. They tried to found out in the desert there. It didn't work. They went to Arizona. It didn't work. Finally, they agreed upon they need a water source. So they took Salt Lake, right? If you watch documentaries on the ghost towns, that's where I first picked up on that, and then I looked into that and come to find out, wow, Utah was not where they intended to go. Utah is the glorified story they give you that they tried other places and failed until they agreed that they needed a water source to be able to turn a desert into an oasis, right? Fulfilling the book of Jeremiah that the children of Israel will go and turn a desert into an oasis and thrive and be away from everyone, right? So, but if you look into the history of Joseph Smith, and especially his family, that's where you got to go to his mother. The man was raised in witchcraft, and now it's harder to find, but before you could easily find the links between Joseph Smith, not the religion, but Joseph Smith and Freemasonry. So here you had a guy that was into Freemasonry and witchcraft, which is one and the same, really. Like there's a video, it's probably no longer on YouTube because YouTube is scrubbing itself of any good content and just giving you rainbows and unicorns and ice cream, right? But there used to be a good video on there where it showed a side-by-side comparison of the first indoctrination into Freemasonry, the first rite, right, that they do, whatever it is, ritual, the knocking of the door, being blindfolded, having a sword put to your, or a spear put to your heart, or your bare chest, and then you have to, walk into it and stuff like that. And then the same thing with witchcraft, taken to a bonfire, right, and blindfolded. They have a sword they put to you, and it showed that they both say the same oaths at the end, say the same phrase at the end to be initiated into their crafts that they take upon. So it's not that far of a stretch once you realize that witchcraft and Freemasonry are just two sides of the same story being fed to people who need it fed to them in that specific way. It's like Star Wars, right? It's like Star Wars and Harry Potter. Star Wars and Harry Potter are the same stories to a great degree, being told to you by different authors, right? So if you didn't accept it with one author, you'll accept it with another one if that's what you're into. Just look at the whole, Harry Potter. That's that's like your Anakin living with an uncle, having a strange, powerful wizard come to him and convince him that he was the future. You know, having a love story with a girl that ends up falling for his best friend. That kind of thing. That's the whole Leia and what's his name, Han Solo. You know, there's more. I just can't think of the rest off the top of my head. But you look at that and you see it there. So it's like that's all. It's all the same. Octopus, just different tentacles to it. So, well, like I said, this was just it was something that the way that they were upset about that the keys being given over, and how this guy would touch the hands of Peter, proclaiming that now he has the keys. And I wasn't even looking for that. I was just looking for where he specifically would, someone would write that he specifically said that the Pope is now their Peter. But it just bothered me the way that was written, and I also thought it was just interesting how they know that, and it's like an admission that none of them have the keys right now, and how the keys have to be restored by only something that had the authority to give them the keys in the first place. They lost the keys of authority and closed themselves off from the channels of revelation. Sorry.